From record producers who took her to foreign countries to forklift drivers who turned out to be stalkers, Agnetha Fältskog has had such a crazy sex life. In this crazy, untold story of her relationships, we reveal the dark psychology that tainted every single one of Agnetha's relationships. What exactly was behind the collapse of her marriage to Björn Ulvaeus? And how did that lead to the dissolution of ABBA? We'll share it all in this video. When it comes to Agnetha Fältskog, her sex life is overshadowed by her towering relationship with Björn Ulvaeus. And how could it not? Not only was he her romantic partner, but he was her business partner and creative partner as well. When their relationship was great, the band was excellent. However, when they broke up, so did ABBA. Sure, the importance of Agnetha's relationship with Björn cannot be overstated. However, he was far from the only man she ever dated. In moments, we will get to Agnetha's relationship with Björn. But who were the men that made and broke her before she ever met him? Agnetha's first public relationship was with a young man known as Björn Lilja. As she was a teenager at the time of their union, the relationship was marked by all the characteristics of young love. Predictably, they broke up, giving Agnetha one of her worst ever heartbreaks. This inspired her to write the song Jag var så kär, meaning I was so in love. This song, particularly the passion with which the young Agnetha sang it, gave her media prominence. Agnetha learned very young that she could turn the pain and disappointment of her life into art, which would then bring her money. While this became something she did again and again and again, it did not always help. As she would come to learn later in life, sometimes a song can't save a relationship. Agnetha's next relationship was with German songwriter and record producer Dieter Zimmermann. Things got so serious so quickly between the two, and they soon became engaged. Zimmermann promised Agnetha that if she moved from Sweden to Germany, she would encounter great success. However, things did not go as planned. In Germany, producers and executives were not as smitten with the young Agnetha as Zimmermann was. As such, all the countless meetings she attended didn't go anywhere. The producers also tried to make Agnetha something she was not, giving her material that was not true to herself. Though Agnetha wanted to be a star, she wasn't ready to achieve that dream at any cost. Agnetha then ended her engagement with Zimmermann. She also left Germany and returned to Sweden. She realized that if she wanted to make it to the top of the music industry, Zimmermann was not the man for her. Once back in Sweden, she was about to meet a man who would change her fortunes for the better. At last, Björn Ulvaeus has entered the picture. At the time of Agnetha's first meeting with him, he was a member of a folk group known as the Hootenanny Singers. They met first in 1968 and then later in 1969. These meetings were purely on a platonic level, as they were both musicians on the come-up in Sweden. Eventually, Agnetha and Björn began to spend a lot more time together. This time, their meetings were more of a creative nature, as romance had not yet entered the mix. They also started hanging out with Benny Andersson and Annie Frid Lyngstad. Björn and Benny had written several songs together, while Agnetha and Anne also had a burgeoning friendship. Well, this is more or less how the supergroup ABBA came to be. The beginning of one of the greatest bands to ever exist was also the beginning of romance between its four members. Agnetha and Björn gravitated toward each other and had great chemistry. It wasn't long until their relationship escalated from simple dating to a full-blown marriage. On July 6, 1971, Björn and Agnetha tied the knot. Since it was a wedding between musicians, you know they did not need to hire any external singers to make their day special. Björn himself played the organ at their ceremony. This was the beginning of a wonderful, creative, romantic, and business partnership. The other members of ABBA, Annie Frid Lyngstad and Benny Andersson, did not miss out on a romance either. Though they lived together for several years, they did not marry until 1978, when ABBA was at the height of its success. However, their marriage dissolved not more than 2 years later, and this dissolution coincided with both the dissolution of Agnetha and Björn's marriage, as well as the collapse of ABBA. Now, while the main focus of this video is Agnetha's personal sex life, it's impossible to understand why she and Björn drifted apart without analyzing the group as a whole. They lived together and worked together, and most of the songs they wrote were about their own personal problems. So, that being said, where did it all go wrong? How did Agnetha and Björn and Annie and Benny mess things up so royally? It's worth noting that unlike Annie and Benny, Agnetha and Björn had 2 children together. They are Linda Elin Ulvaeus, who was born on 23 February 1973, and Peter Christian Ulvaeus, who was born on 4th December 1977. As such, the breakup between Agnetha and Bjorn had much higher stakes than the breakup between Annie and Benny. In the late 70s, ABBA was the best-selling group in the world, and was second only to Volvo as the biggest Swedish export. Yet, all that massive success was not enough to hold the group together. Agnetha and Bjorn started to grow further and further apart. Eventually, they got to the point where they couldn't live together anymore. Meanwhile, Benny's alcohol problem got so bad that Annie couldn't stay with him anymore. Fans were mostly oblivious to this, but the writing was on the wall for ABBA the super band. Given how important ABBA was to the economy and culture of Sweden, Agnetha and Bjorn tried their hardest not to let their personal problems interfere with their work. But how could they not? After all, it was mainly by making personal songs that they managed to make ABBA such a hit in the first place. This was a real conundrum for them. Incidentally, it was during this turbulent period that ABBA made some of their all-time great songs. Bjorn admitted he wrote, "Knowing You, Knowing Me," after realizing his union with Agnetha was not long for the world. He also wrote, "The Winner Takes It All," when it was confirmed they'd be splitting up. Given how monumental both ABBA and Bjorn were to Agnetha's life, the fallout took an incredible toll on her. Things got so bad that she even had to go to therapy. To make matters worse, Bjorn started dating someone else not too long after he and Agnetha split up. This did incredible damage to her self-esteem. Agnetha was so affected by what was going on that she had a creative block. She could no longer write songs as easily or perform as energetically as she used to. It would take years for her to look back on this moment favorably. In her memoir, she revealed that she came to be grateful to Bjorn for managing to make a song out of their breakup. After the dissolution of ABBA, each member went their own way. Annie went on to become royalty, Benny got over his alcohol problem, and Bjorn entered other fulfilling relationships. In fact, as recently as 2020, Bjorn, who was then 75, admitted he still has sex 4 times a week. As for Agnetha, when it came to relationships, life was about to put her through the ringer. It took almost 10 years for Agnetha to put herself out there after her split from Bjorn. However, fans did not find out about this next relationship until it was over. Having had such a public relationship before this point, Agnetha sought to find solace in a private relationship this time. However, even privacy couldn't save her relationship. What happened was that in 1990, Agnetha married Dr. Thomas Sonnenfeld. They dated for 6 months prior to tying the knot. However, just 3 years later, they split up. Fans did not hear of the marriage, but they did hear of the divorce, making them utterly confused. In the years since this marriage ended, both fans and the media alike have tried their hardest to find out what happened. However, the lips have remained tightly sealed on both ends. On one hand, Thomas has continued to work quietly as a surgeon in Sweden. On the other hand, Agnetha has hardly written or spoken about their relationship. To make matters worse, life threw Agnetha a horrific curveball not long after their relationship ended. It was an incident that put her fragile mind state under even more stress. What happened was that Agnetha's mother ended things when she jumped from the balcony of her house. This was a tragic event that cast Agnetha into the darkest pits of depression. To make matters even worse, her dad also died a year later. It seemed life was determined not to give Agnetha a break. At this point, Agnetha was so depressed that she stopped recording entirely, not to talk of dating. However, as time went on and with the help of therapy, she tried to climb back into the light. Eventually, she was ready to take a chance on life again. Agnetha hoped that this next relationship would be her last one. Well, as you may have guessed, things didn't quite go as planned. In 1997, Agnetha started a relationship with a Dutch forklift driver known as Gert van der Graaf. He had been an obsessed fan for several years and was always badgering Agnetha. At the time their relationship began, Agnetha was in one of the lowest ebbs of her life. She was not herself, her sense of judgment was not clear, and she had cut herself off from anyone who might have tried to advise her. Agnetha was with Gert van der Graaf for 2 whole years before she began to wise up. However, when she tried to end their relationship, of course, Gert didn't agree. He began to stalk Agnetha at her mansion in Sweden. Agnetha, who feared for her life, had no choice but to seek a restraining order. The courts were overwhelmingly on Agnetha's side, so much so that in addition to giving Gert a restraining order against her, they also deported him back to the Netherlands. Well, this was the end of Gert the Stalker, right? Wrong. While in the Netherlands, Gert van der Graaf bided his time. Finally, in 2003, he snuck back to Sweden. Did he do this to resume work maybe? Of course not. Instead, he got right back to stalking Agnetha. After Gert was caught, the courts were a lot more harsh towards him this time. In fact, they banned him from entering Sweden completely. However, the ban order only lasted 2 years. As such, when it elapsed in 2005, guess the first location Gert went to. Again, Gert was spotted near Agnetha's residence, but this time, he fled before he was apprehended by the authorities. Agnetha had to carry on living, knowing Gert was never too far away from her. Meanwhile, he made himself a celebrity of sorts by producing a memoir about their relationship. As time went on, Agnetha tried her hardest to forget about Gert. However, he continued to make the rounds in the news. Heck, as recently as 2023, Amazon Prime produced a series about him. Agnetha lashed out in anger about this, furious that her stalker was being given a platform. In her criticisms, she reiterated the fact that Gert was a danger to her. However, the series still went ahead. After all these failed relationships, Agnetha has not been in any other high-profile relationship. However, she has spent a considerable amount of money on therapy so as to get her head straight. These days, she is happier than she has ever been. When it comes to romance, though, there's still a huge question mark in her life. Has Agnetha secretly been dating? If she has, who can blame her? After the horrible experience she had with Gert, it makes complete sense that she would keep any new relationship out of the limelight. However, some of her fans feel cheated by this. Perhaps, sometime soon, Agnetha will again feel comfortable revealing her relationship information to the public. But for now, there's nothing but radio silence. If and when that day comes, you can bet the media will be all over it. For now, though, Agnetha continues to enjoy her millions in relative peace. This has been the untold crazy sex life of Agnetha Fältskog. Which part impressed you the most? Which part scandalized you the most? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, there's a good chance you'll also enjoy the one showing on your screen right now. Click, enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you on the next one.